How do you separate fact from fiction in a world where misinformation is lurking around every corner, ready to make you think you know what you are talking about when you actually don't? Contributing to this misinformation campaign is the omission of important historical texts and books that present viewpoints from marginalized peoples. In Florida, over 1,400 books have been banned or restricted in 2023 alone. Florida and 12 other states, including Texas, Missouri, Utah, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina, have successfully banned or restricted over 3,000 books across 120 school districts in these states in 2023. They are doing this under the guise of protecting our children, but they are more than a little misinformed on this endeavor. Book banning has only ever been about two things: power and control. The most famous historical example of this is Nazi Germany. On May 10, 1993, books written by Jewish or anti-German authors were collected and burned, making it abundantly clear that only German ideals were acceptable. We see this trend continue in the U.S. during the 1950s, as racial tensions were still high. The U.S. book bans primarily targeted liberal authors, legitimizing racist ideas that were reinforced by Jim Crow policies, like segregation. The Rabbit's Wedding is a children's book that was targeted for having a white rabbit and a black rabbit couple as the main characters and love interests. White supremacists have traditionally used this restriction of knowledge as a way to maintain dominance in the United States, while whitewashing history. Texas rewrote history textbooks to argue that slavery was beneficial to blacks, as it taught them valuable skills, and relabeled slaves as immigrant workers. Removing books concerning culturally relevant topics narrows the viewpoint of students and relegates marginalized voices even further. This eradicates any conversation about diversity and liberty that the U.S. claims to be built on. Additionally, removing books that mention anything about or that were written by members of marginalized ethnic groups contributes to misinformed ideas. These include notions that white privilege, white fragility, and even racism and inequality as a whole do not exist. Notably, whites tend to report a sense of white shaming by even being reminded of the existence of slavery, Jim Crow policies, and segregation as major parts of American history that their white ancestors were responsible for. Beyond solely books, entire curriculums have come under fire as some approaches to educating students in apolitical subjects, like math, have gained the moniker woke. Teaching methodologies that stress the importance of student mental health and of understanding different problem-solving techniques are regularly described as being Marxist and pushing critical race theory. These terms, although thrown around frequently, are sociological ideas or lenses that are used to observe the world, not ideologies that schools are trying to force upon children. Moms for Liberty are a prime example of a group committed to banning books and censoring educational materials that they deem inappropriate or unsafe. In the following clip, you will see a member from Moms for Liberty deliver testimony at a nondescript U.S. school board meeting over a passage from the novel George vs. George, in which she expresses her disapproval of books that describe or depict instances of severe violence, even if based on significant historical events like the American Revolution, being available to students in public schools.
District 2, Moms for Liberty. This is an excerpt from the 4th grade George vs. George book, page 48. Besides constantly stealing food and horses, the redcoats burned entire towns and villages, looted or seized houses, raped and murdered innocent civilians, and set fire to crops in timberland. While there are other quotes worth mentioning, it is important to note the violent images on these pages I just read, including children running out of their homes being shot, soldiers shooting Indians while females are running away with babes in arms, soldiers setting fires to a house that still has a child alive inside.
This clip is important because it shows how everyday citizens and parents are pushing for increased censorship and outright removal of whatever they identify as unsafe, graphic, inappropriate, or un-American books or educational material. What do you think? Where do you draw the line on what is educational and what is gratuitous vulgarity?